perhaps one of the major things to come out of that testimony has been how the management of Standard Bank was somewhat insulted, at least as they felt, by the leaders of the ANC, who demanded to know whether they were being used as puppets in terms of the decision and what led to their decision to close down the Gupta accounts.
Well, what Sinton said was that they felt they had a duty to go to the governing party's headquarters and show respect in a way after they'd received this letter, he said, from Gwede Mantashe, then Secretary General, to the CEO of Standard Bank. And he was asked why did they go to this meeting, which seemed to be really about why the bank had decided not to work with Gupta-related companies anymore, but not from what I heard kind of being incensed by it or insulted, but more just wanting to show respect and did concede after Chairperson Zondo asked that it wasn't ordinary to have this kind of meeting at the heart of the governing party.
Some of the reports that I've seen online are saying that Sim Chabalala, in response to that meeting, was actually quite upset by how that meeting played itself out. Perhaps give us more details.
Yes, so what Sinton actually said is that it was the most incensed he'd seen Chabalala. So it was during the progression of the meeting and these questions around white monopoly capital and allegations of Standard Bank being involved in this kind of conspiracy and taking instructions out of Stellenbosch regarding its decision to close the Gupta-linked accounts, that Chabalala then became so incensed. And Sinton said it was the angriest he'd ever seen his boss.
And why did they make the decision to close the Gupta accounts?
Well, Kathy, this is where we have new information that has never been in the public domain before. When this decision was taken, CEO then of Oak Bay Investments, Nazim Hauer, said the bank simply did not give any information on why they took the decision. And today we had a kind of systematic and step-by-step guide on what are some of the decisions or the events that informed the decisions of Standard Bank, describing, for example, Jonas's announcement, Fakey Mentor's announcement on what they'd said had happened when they were offered ministerial positions by the Gupta family, in Jonas's case with the understanding of Zuma's input as well. Then also concerns over the auditing companies also washing their hands of Gupta-associated businesses, and then these really alarming financial transactions, the movement of monies, which to Standard Bank flagged concerns over illicit financial dealings. And in fact, we do have a moment during which Sinton raises this and talks about not only Festina and the dairy project with Festina monies there they'd investigated, but also Tegeta. And we know that Duduzane Zuma was a shareholder in Tegeta at the time it acquired Optimum's coal mine. Let's take a look.
We then also had this company. We banked a company by the name of Festina. Festina was a company which was awarded a contract in the Free State province to develop a farm. And there was wide publicity around how the farm itself had not been developed, but substantial sums of money being paid to our client, Festina. When we investigated, we found that large proportions of that money were in fact sent to Dubai rather than being spent in South Africa on the farm. That caused obviously was suspicious on our part. After a company by the name of Tegeta had concluded the agreement to acquire control of Optimum coal mine, we received an email from Oak Bay laying claim to about 1.45 billion rands worth of funds that we held for a trust that had been established for the rehabilitation of the mine. We regarded that as suspicious.
And certainly all of this is a trail of the transactions that they felt were suspicious, even though they didn't have any evidence or proof. But in terms of the risk that the banks used as a justification for not keeping the Gupta's business on, what did they see as those risks? What did they say were those risks?
Yes, well, the point about risk is so important because different banks in different sectors or parts of the world have different appetites for risk. And that appetite for risk changes according to events that happen. And so what we heard today was that as things progressed and evidence came to light, and Standard Bank itself also conducted an investigation and had a committee make a decision on its relationships with Gupta-associated companies, they decided that there was enough smoke you could say, to use the if there's smoke, there's fire metaphor, to decide to step away. But Sinton, as you've rightly importantly highlighted, emphasized that they're not an adjudicator. And so they don't necessarily get right to the bottom of the matter before deciding there's too much risk here, there's too much at stake for Standard Bank broadly and globally speaking, and we need to step away because we could be facilitating money laundering, illicit financial flows, or even in some cases the funding of terrorism. And there Sinton highlighted that just a year before all of this, Standard Bank Incorporated in London had been implicated in a scandal, a corruption scandal in Tanzania, and had to pay a large British fine. And so that meant that their appetite for risk was decreased somewhat.
All right. Let's then get into the officials who were seen as trying to change the minds of Standard Bank in terms of their decision regarding the Gupta's accounts. Let's speak firstly about the ANC and then secondly the cabinet minister. Who in the ANC, and I want names now, if names were said, who in the ANC specifically tried to coerce Standard Bank to change its mind, and which members of the executive at the time did that?
So what Sinton said on his testimony and on documents which have been supplied to the inquiry into allegations of state capture, it was Gwede Mantashe who wrote to Sim Chabalala, then CEO of Standard Bank, calling for a meeting. And at that meeting, both Mantashe and Jesse Duarte, along with Godonwane, were all present. And they discussed Standard Bank's decision, they discussed the bank's relationship with the Gupta and its associated companies, and raised these questions about reports in the press of this conspiracy, of this kind of white monopoly capital project, and asked what Standard Bank's officials' response was to being embroiled in that kind of project. And this was really at the height of state capture, when Bell Pottinger was, hard at work in kind of massaging opinion around the banks and their sort of politics, I suppose you could say.
And the cabinet ministers?
So there it's very important, of course, that Mosebenzi Zwane was the head of this interministerial committee that was looking into matters. Weirdly, Mzwanele Mani, who Sinton called Jimmy Mani, spoke as well, and he was present at that meeting. Mani said, as an advisor to the ministers, there the advocate leading the evidence for the inquiry asked, well, do you have any official government position? Was he a minister at the time? The answer, of course, was no. And then we also had the Minister of Labour, Mildred Oliphant. So we had two cabinet ministers and then a sort of person widely associated with the Guptas and their businesses all holding this meeting. And Sinton highlighted, which I think is important, that this committee was set up by cabinet under the instructions of the then President Jacob Zuma. So it didn't just emerge out of nowhere. It came through tiers of government and had to look into this broken relationship between the Gupta-associated businesses and Standard Bank.